love the chaos, the nimbleness, the uncertainty, but also the opportunity. I love it all.
Welcome to the Keep Austin Secure podcast, the podcast where we sit down with leaders, founders, and innovators shaping the future of cybersecurity right here in Austin. From startup journeys and hard-earned lessons, we dive into the stories behind the people building one of the fastest growing communities in the country. Today, we have Dave Endler, founder and general partner at Runtime Ventures. Dave, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on, Dave. Thanks for coming on. And for the listeners who don't know who Dave Endler is, I would love to have a brief introduction.
Okay. So the history of myself in a minute or less. Professionally, I got my start at the NSA, security researcher, then bounced around to different other areas. I worked at MIT for a blink, at Deloitte & Touche for a blink, kind of diametrically opposed cultures. And then I joined my very first security startup in 1999. It was a threat intel company called iDefense in the DC area. And I loved it. And I figured out that's what I want to do. I want to be in security startup mode. And then I moved to Austin for another security startup called Tipping Point in 2003. So I've been in Austin ever since. Fast forward, I ended up co-founding two cyber companies. The last one was SpyCloud, and then started Runtime Ventures with a longtime friend who I met at iDefense, Michael Sutton, 2 years ago.
Amazing. No, it's a brilliant story, and a guy who everyone's always got great things to say about, Dave. That's one thing I'd want to say just at the start of the podcast.
Thank you. I'm blushing.
And so you've been in Austin for a number of years now. Not from here, but obviously lived in the city for so long. Just before we go into Runtime and your founding journey and talk a little bit about Austin, how has the city changed, and how's the ecosystem within cybersecurity changed in Austin since you've moved over here?
Oh gosh. So, I mean, it's been 23 years. How has the city changed could probably be a podcast in and of itself to fill this entire time. When I moved here, there weren't a lot of other security people in town. I think there were some who were working for Dell. Tipping Point was around. There were a few of us here, but it's amazing to me. The biggest change I've seen just over the last 10 years is the amount of security people that have moved here, both founders, practitioners. I've loved seeing the community grow to that extent. I think, also as Austin has become more of a tech hub, it's become more attractive for maybe other larger companies like the Facebooks and the, Dropboxes, et cetera, to have satellite offices here. And so again, you see more security practitioners coming here, which is great. It's a plus for the entire community. So yeah, I don't know if there was an inflection point. I can't speak to a specific point in time. Certainly pre-COVID, there were still quite a few security people coming into town, but maybe that's something you can ask the next podcast guest, or I'll think about it and get back to you.
Yeah, no, amazing. And in 2023, you took a leap of faith, leaving SpyCloud and setting up Runtime Ventures. I know just having lunch before this, we were talking about, why it was and everything along those lines. Yeah, talk us through it. What was the spark there?
To leave SpyCloud and start Runtime. Well, so I have to go back. So iDefense, as with a lot of early stage startups, you form bonds and friendships that are long lasting. I think for regardless of cybersecurity, just any industry, you're going to war together. You're late nights. You all have a singular mission. Even if the startup doesn't work out, those are bonds that last for a while. And so one of the people from that time was Michael Sutton. Michael and I worked together at iDefense. The company actually went through bankruptcy. It's actually detailed in Nicole Perlroth's book. This is How They Tell Me the World Ends. So that's a different story, but the company eventually emerged from bankruptcy, got acquired by VeriSign. Michael and I started off as colleagues, became great friends. He ended up doing a few startups and then was very early on at Zscaler, eventually becoming its CISO. Post Zscaler IPO, so 10 years later, he started investing. Instead of starting another startup, he had friends starting companies that were akin to ideas that he had, but instead of doing them himself, he rather invested in their companies. And so after about 5 years, his investments under the name Stone Mill Ventures had made 42 investments in cyber, some wonderful companies. Theirs was Sublime Security, who we all know today. There's, what are some others that we were talking about at lunch? Gray Noise. There were some that just got acquired, which I won't talk about depending on when this gets published.
Yeah.
And so he kept on bugging me every few years to come and join him and start a fund together. But I was actively involved at SpyCloud, having a great time. Company was doing wonderful. We were growing. It was one of those amazing experiences where you had the right team, the right time, the right opportunity. And so, long story short, I'd been at SpyCloud for about 7 years. We had just finished a Series D financing, and I was just doing some soul searching, introspection, and I realized, my passion, my superpower has always been in the early stage. I love the chaos, the nimbleness, the uncertainty, but also the opportunity. I love it all. Even when it's me not building, maybe it's me investing, doing angel investments, or even mentoring. And so, long story short, Michael and I started Runtime Ventures 2 years ago. We decided that the earliest stage of cyber investing was where we could really deploy our talents. That's where both of us had the most experience. And so that was our thesis: start a venture firm exclusively focused on pre-seed and seed stage cyber.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you always have an eye on setting up your own venture capital firm?
No, I mean, I don't know anyone who, grows up thinking I want to be a VC. I mean, I'm sure there are people that do, but no, I mean, the idea became more and more attractive. Less about deploying capital, but more about the mentorship and the help and being able to guide people in avoiding some of the mistakes that I had made, honestly.
Yeah. How are you finding everything? I know it's very different to be on the other side of the fence. Are you enjoying it? Is it everything that you expected it to be?
Well, one of the more interesting things that I learned is that, fundraising as a founder, it's humbling, of course. You have to get used to a lot of no's. Fundraising as a fund manager is also humbling. You also do get to have, a lot of no's. When you're on your first fund, it's not like you can go to the big institutional investors like the retirement fund managers and the universities. They typically won't touch a fund one. They want to see some, runtime, excuse the pun. But when we were fundraising, we started with the people we knew best, and those are individuals in the security community, many of who've had an exit. Some of them are founders, some of them are practitioners. And so we ended up at Runtime with 81 investors. 3 of them are public companies, but 61 of them hail from the cybersecurity space.
Wow.
So that's a huge differentiator for us, not just for deal flow, but for diligence, asking, hey, someone who's sold an identity company more about an identity opportunity, they're going to know much more than we are. And then also, post-investment, many of them have raised their hand because they want to get more involved. So it's wonderful. So that's something I didn't expect it would be as hard to fundraise, as it was. But outside of that, it's been wonderful. I love that we get to meet so many amazing, interesting founders. I love that I get to also learn about different areas of cybersecurity that I normally wouldn't get a chance to learn about because I'm talking to some amazing, smart people all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you got one piece of advice for, say there's a founder out there that's going through an exit now or has exited and they're thinking about potentially setting up their own venture capital firm or setting up starting a fund or raising a fund, etc. Would you have like one piece of advice for a person in those shoes right now?
I would say start by angel investing, smaller amounts, and whatever amount of money you set up to invest in it as an angel, be prepared to lose all of it. Don't count on that to pay the family mortgage. And just the basic math of angel investing is similar to venture. One out of 10, 1 out of 20 may succeed. There's a lot of failures out there. So a lot of angel investments, I think, tend to be emotional investments. Like a friend is starting a business, or there's a restaurant coming online down the street, and we'd love to be part owners, or things like that. But I think starting to get into a structure of looking at these investments from the lens of the team, the market, the terms, looking at kind of the long-term potential to pay back your money. That's what I would recommend. So just dabble a little bit with angel investments. And then also start talking to a lot of the funds, because many of them would love, especially if you're a recently exited founder, many of them would love to get you on their newest portfolio company's cap table, even if it's a smaller check.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And do you find that there's any of the skills or strengths that you had whilst you were building your businesses that you've kind of translated into Runtime that have set you up for success since setting up the venture capital firm?
I think community. I don't know that community is necessarily with all startups, but it's something I valued when I was coming up. The two startups I started and co-founded. I wish I had more mentors and people guiding me at the time. The first startup that me and my co-founder started, we did not raise any venture money, and it was hard. It was very hard. Now, we were lucky we had a decent outcome, but the second time around, we did raise money. That was for SpyCloud, and again, I think that anyone raising, regardless if you're in the security space, it'd be great if there were just other people telling you about their experience, advising you. And that's why I love the community. I love that, especially in Austin, there's a lot of people who will give cautionary tales or will even recommend on the other side positive experiences in which funds they like working with. So
yeah, definitely. And you must spend large majority of your time, as you said, almost kind of educationally speaking to founders and new businesses that are coming through and new ideas. Are there any particular red flags that you see as like common reasons as to why you maybe wouldn't invest in a business, or why you've seen founders or early stage businesses not work out?
I won't say red flags, but I'll tell you maybe on the flip side what we look for at Runtime. In general, the first thing that we look for, probably most investors look at, is the team. Now, ideally, we say we like to see a hacker and a hustler. And that's a tip of the hat to Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak from Apple. But what's more akin to reality is that you have maybe 2 or 3 technical founders, and one maybe half a hustler, and that's okay. What investors like us and many others want to believe is that you and your team can meaningfully lead founder-led sales and get to a point to get to maybe a strong Series A, and then you can bring on more go-to-market talent. Maybe that's a go-to-market leader and a team. So in terms of the team, it doesn't mean everyone has to be a salesperson, but you've got to believe that they can get on a call, convince a customer to try, especially if they're so early, maybe they don't even have a website. So they're having to convince design partners or early beta users to take a chance and take a risk. So there has to be some level of conviction there. The other thing we look at often is the market. So there's a lot of hot markets right now. I mean, gosh, AI for security for AI, those are probably half of the pitches that we see, and rightfully so. I mean, you're seeing some crazy acquisitions out there. But so in terms of the market, is the market growing? Is it of concern to CISOs today? And then, there are some markets that are obviously very large, but, if someone's trying to raise 1 million to make a dent in the EDR market, that's a hard sell. And so how is your team, how is your company going to differentiate itself? So if there's not a clear plan, if there's not a technical differentiation, another thing we look at are the terms. So, how much money are you raising, and then what valuation are you giving the company? Now, there are some investors that love to invest at the PowerPoint and a smile phase, especially for repeat founders. For us, even for repeat founders, we'd like to see a little bit of traction. Now, traction to us doesn't mean revenue. It means maybe some early design partners and people that we can interview to understand their reaction to the product, why they're excited about the problem that's being solved. Is it going to displace an existing product? And then we also look at team dynamics. It's great if the team has worked together in the past, if there's that trust. It'd be a little bit concerning if the founders had just met. And so you kind of wonder, all right, are there, can they get along? How are they going to do conflict resolution?
Yeah.
The first big argument they have, are they going to, break up? And so these are things that we look at.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And we spoke about security for AI security. There is so much noise in the market today, be that around that category or other areas, identity, for example. There's so many vendors coming through, seems almost weekly or daily by this point. What's your perspective on, from a differentiation standpoint, if you're a founder in one of these so-called like crowded markets, how can a founder, CEO, CTO really enable their business to kind of stand out and differentiate above the rest in a crowded market?
So I think, especially in the early stage, for a lot of these markets, the AI security market, it's funny to even call it a market. This is such a nascent space that I think everyone is still trying to figure out, all right, first of all, just talking about agentic AI security, this is something we weren't even talking about a year ago. So to claim that there's a market there, we're all trying to figure it out. So I think one thing as an investor, you want to believe that the team has the ability to pivot and figure it out along the way. I don't think anyone has it all figured out now, just because the technology is moving so rapidly. So a lot of it is a belief in the team. Have they done this before? Have they started with an idea, pivoted, created something along the way? We're not going to hold any company to having figured it out, and the solution that you pitch today is certainly not going to be the solution that goes to market. Yeah. And we all know that. So I think convincing any investor that you are attuned to the problem space, that you're watching, certain trends, that you're talking to potential customers rather. I think these are all things we're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. Because even if you look at AI, for example, ChatGPT today is very different to January 2025. People thought it was just a different version of Google in January. So, and then being able to stay ahead of the trend of the market, for example, as the actual market itself is changing. It's not going to be about the product today, is going to be what's going to be successful in 2-3 years time.
For sure. But, we are also interested in markets where, there are entrenched players. So there are some markets where, we like to call it dinosaur disruption. We love seeing people going after spaces that have been around for a while, that have 2 or 3 incumbents. Everyone knows the names, but because of maybe it's a go-to-market edge, maybe it's a technical edge. They think they can unseat and displace some of those existing technologies. So we love that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine there's been quite a few times over the last 2-3 years whilst you've come off the back of a call and just got so excited about a business or so excited about an idea, and just the idea of disruption within a certain area.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I've learned is to keep an open mind, especially about industries, that I have felt maybe had already seen their peak maybe 10 years ago. And this happened recently where we got a pitch, in particular in this particular industry, and the founders had figured out a new spin on it, and they had some traction. They actually had some customers, and it was a great team, and so we got excited. It surprised me.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Just a quick question as well. It's just come into mind. Then, if you could give Dave Endler one piece of advice back in January 2023, now what would it be?
Oh. Well, and this can't be, buy this meme coin or...
No, absolutely not. All off the cards. Runtime Ventures. I can imagine it's similar, but also slightly nuanced to what you imagine it was going to be like in building. If you could, on day one, write on a piece of paper a piece of advice, what would it be?
Gosh, so the fund is, we're a $32 million fund. We've made 13 investments so far. We imagine we'll make in this fund close to 35. It's too soon to tell if we passed on a company that we should have invested in. So I don't, maybe ask me in 3 more years if I'm, if I'm kicking myself on passing on the next whiz or what have you. But I think, listen, I don't think there's any lessons learned yet, except to say that I feel so grateful I get to do what I do. I get to still be in this industry that I've come up in. I get to talk to amazing founders and hear their story. I love hearing their origin story, and then, in some cases commiserating. And then I love supporting, amazing companies that I truly believe in that are going to be successful. So honestly, I no regrets so far. Ask me next year.
We'll do episode 2. That sounds good.
For sure.
So in terms of Runtime as well, what operational support do you mostly provide? The hiring, go-to-market, security research?
So we tend to tailor our support to the company. In fact, we like to get homework. And so we love founders who task us with things. I think every early stage cyber startup wants introductions to CISOs, practitioners, and we're happy to do that. But I think, also at important stages in their life, they need to hire, say a head of sales, maybe not head of sales, but maybe their first sales hire. And so, maybe the founders have never put together a comp plan before or don't even know what's market. Now, we don't necessarily have all the answers, but again, we have such a rich LP base. We have people who have led sales teams. We can deploy those resources and make sure that they get the help. And then also fundraising. When it's time for the next raise, we can make great intros and even just help prepare founders. Okay, what are the milestones we really need to achieve to have a strong, Series A? Who do we think, out there in terms of partners or firms that don't have a conflict would be a great, relationship that we can introduce you to? So that's part of it. And also, it's all the stuff that you don't expect, just being a sounding board for all the times when maybe things aren't going well.
Yeah.
I think on LinkedIn, we all like to celebrate the great wins, and we all see like the happy face, for startup founders. And we've all posted the wonderful, funding announcements, but you don't see all the roller coaster of emotions that went in, right before that, or the customer losses that you don't see about.
So. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And just finally, in terms of from an investment perspective as well, where are you seeing, or where do you expect like the most attractive opportunities to be from a security perspective, like identity? I know obviously everyone's talking about AI at the moment, runtime. But yeah, what would you say if you had to pick like 1 or 2 categories?
So, in general, I think categories that maybe aren't necessarily new and sexy are still interesting from an investment perspective, especially if you could, go after, as I said, the entrenched incumbents, the dinosaur disruption, as it were. And so, I think you're seeing that. We've seen that from an email security perspective. I'll give you an example. I think traditionally you've seen Mimecast and Proofpoint own that market, maybe even Microsoft to an extent, and then now Sublime and Abnormal are kind of, I don't know if you can call them the newcomers anymore. They've been around for a while, but they kind of came in and started taking down some market share. And I think we're seeing actually a new layer, of AI-enabled email security players trying to get some of that market share. That's an example of one that's an existing market that may just have some new players emerge because of, AI gives them an edge. There's some areas that we're interested in. We haven't made an investment in yet. I'd say one of them is next-gen DLP. I think from the security practitioners we've talked to and CISOs, they've seemed to have figured out privileged access management, or at least, onboarding. First day of work, you get access to these files and these directories. But what we're hearing is that they haven't yet figured out, at least real time, how to detect if that new hire is, say, looking at all of the files in that directory. Should they be? We know they should have access, but should they really be looking at all of those things? So AI is a great, way to disrupt that market. Gen AI is great at looking at context and documents real time. And so, that's an area where we're seeing some companies get funded, actually follow on pretty quick with successive rounds to go after kind of the next gen of DLP. We're seeing kind of AI empowered pen testing, take off. So, that category, if you want to call it a category, you have Expo, Horizon 3, Pantera, and those. And so we're seeing pitches and then also, funding announcements from a lot of companies trying to go after that market, entrenched players, obviously there as well. And then, we're also looking at areas, we're opportunistic. Like we have a thesis on certain areas we'd love to see pitches on, but we're opportunistic. We love to be surprised by someone working in a space, especially maybe it's not AI related, but it's important to CISOs and they have, a few customers or a few design partners that have proven that, yes, what they're working on is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do you think, just finally on Runtime, what do you think the future looks like for Runtime Ventures?
Well, hopefully, in this fund, we make lots of great investments, and our investors are happy. But more so, Michael and I have talked about it. I don't think that, for Fund 2, if there's a Fund 2, it would be in the hundreds of millions of dollars of money raised. I think it's hard to do an early stage fund with that much capital. I think we'll always kind of focus on the earliest stage, pre-seed and seed stage checks. And so, Fund 1 was 32 million. I imagine if we did Fund 2 again, it would be maybe a little bit higher, but not much more.
Yeah. Yeah. And going into, I guess, the pre-runtime experience with SpyCloud, JumpShot, etc., going through JumpShot, SpyCloud, Tipping Point, iDefense, all amazing, successful businesses. How did each chapter change your mental model of building security products?
So, how did each? Wow. So, I'll say at Tipping Point, I got to manage the team that was responsible for developing attack filters. So I wouldn't say I was building a product. We were blessed with an amazing product that was essentially an intrusion prevention system that ran on hardware. It was able to keep up much faster than software-based IPS. And so, honestly, the stress of always having to keep up with the latest attacks, and something would come out on Microsoft Tuesday and having to get an attack filter written and tested and deployed in a way that didn't take down someone's network. That's something that was stressful. But I'd say the biggest thing I learned from Tipping Point is that you can do a lot of great things, but if you take down someone's network, it doesn't matter how many wonderful things you did, you're going to get yanked out. So QA is extremely important.
Yeah.
And then also being able to express your successes within the product is also important. So being able to show that you did block this many attempts, and making sure those aren't false positives. And then Tipping Point, we started a program called the 0-Day Initiative there, which was awesome. We actually were incentivizing researchers to share their vulnerabilities with us. We would actually pay them. We would disclose the vulnerabilities to the vendor at the same time writing an attack filter. So that was an amazing experience because we got to interact with hundreds of really smart researchers and actually see some vulnerabilities, way ahead of the curve. And then just, have our finger on the pulse of, where are people looking? And it's interesting that, there would be a vulnerability that would come out in one area of code. And then, a month later, we'd see, 10 researchers submit something in the general zip code of that area of code. And just to see some of those trends, it was awesome. And so JumpShot was the first time I ever started a company, and we were doing everything. We were, head of IT. My co-founder Pedram and I, we'd known each other forever. We're great friends, and so I was the CEO, he was the CTO, and then we also were all of the jobs: head of HR, head of IT, head of cleanup. And so for that one, we started off in the consumer security space, with the eventual plan that we were going to go to enterprise. And so what I learned there is that consumer security is really hard. It's a different beast. And I will probably never do it again. But learned a lot and had a very great outcome. We were acquired by Avast, which is now NortonLifeLock or GEM. And so through Avast, I actually got to learn more just about how security products are developed across the consumer space. I got to work in product development there for a while, and then I think SpyCloud. I was head of product. Also, I oversaw the threat intel team, and there that was an amazing lightning in a bottle where my co-founders Ted and Alan, we had known each other for a while. Just the experiences we all brought, and just being at the right place at the right time. Timing is so important, and there are so many people who have been at startups that know this. If their startup had just started maybe 2 years prior, 2 years later, they would have been in the right place at the right time. And for SpyCloud, we didn't start off as an account takeover prevention company. We were more of a breach discovery company. And then we realized all these account takeovers, these ATOs were occurring. But then we started to focus on the product. We built these APIs. We built Windows software that could connect into all this breach data. And so, the aha moment for us was, okay, we don't want to be a data company. We want to be the best product company empowered by the industry-leading best data. And so, no one wants to be a data company because you can be yanked out and replaced fairly quickly. But that was a wonderful experience. I learned just, how, one time in particular, I learned that, again, you shouldn't build things you think people want. You should let them lead you there. And there was at least one time where I spearheaded a product that I thought was going to be a banger. I thought it was going to be gold, and it didn't get as much customer feedback at the time. It had a few data points leading me and the team to think that, oh, this was going to be a fantastic launch, and then it didn't turn out to be as stellar as I thought it would be. And so that was probably the biggest learning of the SpyCloud experience, just on the product development side, is really just sometimes it's better to go lean and get more and more feedback before you go out. And perfection does not need to be there in the first release. I think in any startup, that's one of the things I've learned over time. Just get it out there. It doesn't need to be 100% pretty, but just get people to use it and get the feedback so that you don't pour $50,000 to $100,000 worth of effort in to realize that you went down the wrong path.
Yeah.
So
and not just the dollars as well. I guess it's the opportunity cost, isn't it, of time more than anything else.
Absolutely.
So with the first couple of years at SpyCloud, because I'd love to talk a little bit about SpyCloud, given this is an Austin podcast, and
sure.
I think SpyCloud always deserves a shout out on any Austin podcast. With the first few years, exactly what you guys expected, or was there a point, as you mentioned there, where maybe customer adoption was pivoted slightly and product market fit wasn't exactly what we were expecting? Yeah,
actually, we started the company thinking that SMB was going to be our bread and butter, and that couldn't have been further from the truth. And so I remember, the customer support in the early days was, again, it was me and Alan and Ted, and there were some pretty humorous and rough, tickets that got submitted because, we had kind of mom and pop shops that didn't necessarily understand the breadth and the depth of this breach data and what it meant, and reuse of passwords. And I remember, I think it was coming back from RSA. Ted and I got a call from a large travel booking site that one of their hotels had forwarded them a breach alert from us. And they wanted to talk. And I think, to me, that was a seminal moment where, Ted and I were like, wow, maybe this is an enterprise play. And I think that was exciting. And so they ended up becoming a customer.
Yeah. And how does a business like SpyCloud, when the scale then becomes enterprise, how does a business actually pivot in time to be able to be, I guess, quote unquote, enterprise ready?
So yeah, enterprise ready. So what does that mean? I think, I think it's harder post SolarWinds with procurement now. I think back maybe 10 years ago, it was much easier to sign an enterprise deal without having to go through maybe third-party questionnaires and going through a bit of maybe compliance attestation that you do have to today, rather. In particular, I'm seeing more ISO 27001 required, which we never saw, many years ago, especially before the SolarWinds breach. So, enterprise ready for one, I think there's just some pieces of paper you'll need to show to get, the procurement and compliance teams comfortable. I think then support and customer success. So the biggest mistake that I've seen and made is that, look, you can't just release these products out there and expect a year later for an easy renewal conversation. You need to have constant touch points, whether or not it's you or someone you've hired, typically someone in customer success, to go and maybe have, quarterly check-ins. If for some reason your product can phone home, legitimately, and you see some usage data, that's great. If for a quarter you haven't seen anyone use the product, that should be concerning. But I think enterprise ready also means outside of support, documentation. So that's an area where I think a lot of enterprises have high expectations and where you need to actually spend some time. And then I think just uptime, reliability, you got to make sure it works. And as I said back, at tipping point, you can't take down someone's network or take down someone's app or tool. So making sure there's resilience in there.
Yeah. And obviously aligning go to market, etc. For that scale. Talk me through, you were building SpyCloud, getting some good momentum. You needed to start to build out and that first go to market team, head of sales, for example, head of sales and marketing. To you at that point, what were the traits that mattered most in a leader that you were going to bring in, and do those traits still sit the same now for you with your portfolio companies? Do you still give them the same advice, or was there a lesson from it? It was like, oh, actually, maybe what I thought I wanted isn't exactly what we need?
No, I mean, I wouldn't say all of these are requirements, but many of the early people at SpyCloud are people we worked with at Tipping Point. So the first head of sales, Jerry, was someone we had known from the Tipping Point days, was an account executive there. Our CFO, Jennifer, was someone we knew while at Tipping Point. So, while it's nice to have known people for years, in some cases over 10 years, you know what you're getting in terms of, their work product, but also there's a sense of camaraderie. But again, you can't have that in every situation. I think high integrity matters. It's hard. That's hard to figure out in an interview. But you want to make sure, especially in certain roles like accounting and reporting, that you want to make sure there's also a sense of shared mission. I think helping steer the company in a certain direction. There are just some early stage first hires that will go beyond their job role, and they'll see opportunities, they'll speak up. And those people, they're hard to find, but those people are amazing. And, maybe they start at a particular job role, but their function, their responsibilities just expand over the course of the company, and they become, probably their job title doesn't do it justice on all the things that they've had their hands in.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I guess like the so-called like legends and heroes of the business,
like that, the founding engineers. Everyone wants a founding engineer, and that person is going to do everything. Or a founding go-to-market hire. Maybe that person becomes the head of sales later. But it's exciting. But I think also where a lot of companies hiccup is they don't hire fast enough, and they may wait too long to bring on that first maybe finance person or that first go-to-market person. So
yeah. Do you think there's not necessarily a problem, but there's a challenge at the moment across the market of businesses wanting to hire the perfect person into specific roles? Say they have a tick box of 10 different attributes that they need or experiences that they need, and they'll see people with 8 or 7 or 7.58, and they'll just be waiting for that perfect person to come in.
I mean, I've certainly seen people post on LinkedIn some outrageous, job requirements, especially for markets that haven't been around for, more than a year, having 5 years of experience in that market. I think though, I think culture is an important point. So I've seen a lot of people maybe make a higher mismatch in terms of culture, where they might take a big company person who, is used to building out, massive teams, but at Series B and Series C and later companies, and try to pigeonhole that person into a seed stage first, go to market role. And I think culture is an important, point, just in terms of, is this person used to working in early stage startups? Can they do without all the support that they used to have in a large company? And then vice versa. A lot of people at larger companies, might bring on an early stage, startup person that might not, fit in as well. So I think that's important to understand. Can someone, do a lot of the heavy lifting by themselves? Eventually you want them building a team, but can they be a player coach at first? Can they do the sales, or can they lead the engineering? Can they code by themselves before building out the engineering team, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah. And I guess also as well, like, someone might want to do it. Say they're coming from a bigger company, they might want to do it. They might have the attributes to do it and genuinely be motivated by it. But the reality of being in that super early stage, being, I guess, in the knife fight on a daily basis, isn't what it's cracked out to be. As you said, on LinkedIn, everyone sees the wins and the champagne and the exits, but they don't see what's behind the scenes of 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, grinding away to make a dream happen. That who even knows what the dream is, Dave?
Right. And I think it's sometimes very lonely being a founder. I've been there myself, and so again, we are happy, as investors, to always be there, for the founders to vent and to ask for advice. It's hard to do that, to the rest of the team, the employees. You don't want to, have a sense of lower morale if you're constantly complaining about how hard things are.
Yeah. And how important is a founding team? I know when you're looking at potential investments, as you mentioned earlier in the podcast, about the relationship between the 2 or 3 or 4 founders. Thinking about the days, for example, at SpyCloud, where you and the guys set up, like, how important are those relationships?
I mean, very important. You're spending, in some cases, more time with your co-founders and early, employees than you are with your family. And so, it doesn't mean everyone has to get along all the time, but there has to be that sense of a shared mission, and also trust. Trust that maybe if something pops up in the family life, or you want to take maybe a couple days of vacation, that things aren't going to completely fall apart. You can delegate and trust, to your co-founders and other team. Some things, especially from a early stage pitch perspective, that would be things that would be more warning signs, is if part of the founding team aren't full-time, like maybe someone is still at their day job, and they're waiting to maybe come on board post-funding. There's always a danger that post-funding, that person doesn't come on board, because, maybe something happened, maybe they got a promotion, maybe something happened in their personal life. And then, sometimes we see solo founders. Now, for sure, you can certainly have a successful company as a solo founder. There's tons of examples out there, but it's hard. It's lonely, and there's no one you can kind of rely on, or even, sometimes if you're taking a vacation, it's hard. It's all on you. So I prefer to see at least 2 founders, although for sure, as a solo founder, you can be very successful. It's just, I think it's harder.
Yeah. And just talking about Austin as well, it's I moved here in February, as you know. It's a fantastic city, like really enjoying, like, the vibe, the people. When a founder's considering setting up an office or building their business, and they've got, like, the Bay Area or New York, why do you think Austin's an attractive spot?
Well, we're in summer right now. I can't say it's the weather, although it's getting a little cooler. I think, I think Austin I'm biased because I've been here for a while and I have so many friends here. But from the security perspective, there's an amazing community here. As you know, you and Hubscale are supporting the Austin community here. And there are a lot of us that have been around for a long time, that have worked together, or that have been in the security space for long enough where, we might not get a chance to see each other as often as we like to. In fact, it's ironic. A lot of the Austin cyber community sees each other at Black Hat and RSA, not in Austin, which is sad. But there is a great community here. And I think that contributes to other cyber founders wanting to come here when they have their friends, speaking well of the community. At this point, I've lived here so long, so many friends outside of cyber, also, raised a family here. So it's hard to consider, moving somewhere else, even professionally. But I think just in terms of cyber hubs, obviously outside the Bay Area, there's Austin, DC, New York, and then some, up and comers like Nashville, Denver. I'm sure I'm missing some, but I think that plays a part too.
Yeah.
What do you think, actually?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think the people here are super friendly. I think that's one thing that stood out for me.
Yeah.
Coming out here and building the community and meeting people. I've never known so many people would just want to help each other out. I think that's one thing that's really stood out to me. One thing that I noticed is people are happy here.
Okay.
And that's not to say people aren't in other cities, but I think particularly in Austin, you notice that when I come down from doing a week in New York and the sun's shining and people are walking around on the trail, it's fantastic. And I think, as obviously we've got UT and other universities here, some great talent coming through there, but as I think more success stories of Austin come through, looking at like, for example, Tipping Point, but new companies now like Hidden Layer, for example, as we're seeing more success coming through Austin, I think naturally that's going to build like more alumni from those businesses who want to set up more companies. And just general, I think, more traction and more eyes on the city. So I think is definitely a cool spot. I know I'm slightly biased, but I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
Oh, that's great. Welcome. We're happy to have you.
And Dave, would love to go into just to wrap up the podcast, just some quick fire questions, if that works.
Sure, let's do it.
I've got one or two curveballs in here, which could be quite cool and interesting.
All right, bring it.
First one: if you were stranded on a desert island and you could only have one person from the security industry with you, who would it be?
From the security industry.
And this is to survive, not to have fun.
I mean, it's easy because one person,
just one.
Well, so I'll do a shout out for another Austin founder, Pedram Amini. He's not only, he and I founded a company together. He was the best man in my wedding. He's also incredibly fit, former MMA trainer. So, if there's fierce wild animals, he could fight them off. So yeah, I'll pick Pedram.
Yeah. No, brilliant. And what's the one best piece of advice you've ever received, whether that's work or life?
It's a kind of it's an amalgamation of what a lot of people have told me, but I think a lot of founders, struggle with balancing family life and work life, and it's easy to stress out. Your startup is in another sense your baby. It's this thing that, separate from your actual family. And so, one thing that I don't know if one person told me, but I'll just paraphrase. Don't sweat the little stuff, especially when you're a parent and your kids get to be a certain age. That's when you'll have real issues that you worry about. So, it's easier to hear when, you're not in parent mode, or maybe your kids aren't old enough to see that. But yeah, that's
amazing. Keep RSA in San Francisco or not? If not, where?
Oh, that's easy. New Orleans. I actually went to school in New Orleans. I love New Orleans. I think it would be amazing there.
Oh wow. Why just out of interest?
Well, I mean, I'm a little biased, but I have such fond memories of going to college at Tulane, and they have a pretty decent convention area, and it's a little bit different than standard San Francisco RSA every year after year. Yeah,
Yeah, they're amazing,
and just other people have like New Orleans.
Yeah. And what did you want to be when you grew up?
I think at first, like a lot of kids, maybe I wanted to be like Superman, and then I didn't know for sure, but I was the product of a divorced household. My mom was very supportive. It's a very common founding story, and got me a computer when I was really young, and so I gravitated towards that as an escape. And it was, so I knew something in computers. And then a little bit later, more like in high school, I found security. So,
favorite barbecue spot in Austin?
So, yeah, I mean, I think it depends what you're looking for. There's probably a few different categories. If you're looking for maybe ribs, I'd say La Barbecue. Brisket. Of course, Franklin. Everyone talks about Franklin barbecue. Terry Black's is also a favorite for both of those. Just every day. It's you don't have to stand in line for hours to get in, as opposed to Franklin. So those would be my three.
Yeah, I went to Terry Black's last Saturday.
Yeah, what'd you think?
Yeah, it was great. It was fantastic. Yeah. My partner was out. One of my friends cancelled, so I just went to Terry Black's on my own. Just had a great Saturday night. Just
Nice.
sitting there, got in the queue, just enjoyed it. Sat back, watched all the people. Yeah, loved it.
And then took a nap after.
Oh yeah. But no, Dave, look, really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Pleasure having you on. I'm super excited, and first of all, congrats for all the success with Runtime, and super excited to see what the next couple of years have in hold. Yeah, Dave, thanks so much for coming.
And congrats to you and Hubskill for all the stuff you guys are doing.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thanks for
it.
having me.
Cheers, Dave.